Good evening and welcome to Wednesday night Halloween Aces, I guess, so to speak. Uh, I'm Paul, if you haven't seen me before or watched our stream. Tonight, what we're going to be doing is I'm here in the studio alone. Everybody's out doing Halloween things, so happy Halloween to everybody. I came in to set up for tomorrow night's Friday Night Aces stream, and every Thursday or Wednesday, I come down to the studio and I set up the game board. So I was thinking, why not stream it tonight and people can watch how we build a game board here? What we take into consideration when we set up boards, not only for the games you watch on stream, but also for events that we put on at game stores or at conventions in the Greater Toronto area and across Ontario. And hopefully next year that'll include the United States as well. We'll be hopefully traveling south to some of the bigger conventions and putting on some cool displays for you guys. So anybody want to jump in, chat, ask any questions, whatnot. I'll just be sitting here. I'll go to the overhead. I'll switch angles, and you can watch me build a game board if you're sitting out handing out candy and watching. Or waiting for your kids to come home from trick or treating with your significant other. Other than that, let's have some fun tonight. I have the chat open, and I'll go to the overhead. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do here tonight is the attempt is going to be. I know the board looks like kind of a mess right now. I have in the center of the table here, if you see it, this is the wonderful ruined baseball stadium that Les Mandeville, our painting coordinator, has built for us that we ran when Tuck was here. Tuck left yesterday, by the way. I'm kind of in withdrawal. I miss Tuck. I miss having my sidekick. Batman doesn't have Robin, and he's a little upset about it right now. He's still trying to get over it. What we use for Critter Tech, and for those of you that know anything about Critter Tech was a parody. I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s that was written based off of Battletech using animals and creatures, and it was themed against baseball. So we came up with this idea to make a baseball stadium, and Les did a wonderful job of making this mech-sized baseball stadium. You can see here. I'll put the archer at home plate. All right, so it's designed so that we want to play a baseball game with the mechs or something along those lines. We're going to. What I was thinking about doing though is making this into kind of like I can't remember the name of the stadium on Solaris that changes the inside through holographics. It changes what the setting is. But I'm going to make this into like a ruined kind of mech fighting stadium. And then tomorrow night, Jesse and I will play some classic aces and we'll do a Solaris style fight. That's kind of what they ran on Wednesday night, last night, from the game store in downtown Toronto. It was a Solaris themed match for the players. So I was thinking, you know what? That sounds like a good idea for us to run on aces for Friday. So here we are. I'm going to try and build a stadium using the pieces that we have at our disposal here at the studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these walls and I'm going to build an exterior here to kind of make it look like the outside of the stadium from one angle. And then when you come look at it from the other angles, you'll be able to see inside it. I'm going to put some hills around it, some foliage, maybe a couple of like warehouse type buildings. I do have some of these things here. Get a better angle on them. Maybe use these as kind of like outfield light stands of some sort. We'll come up with something, make them look cool anyways. I don't know, game boards. So I'll try to talk about a little bit when we design game boards, how we come up with themes for them, and how we make them for playability. So most people, like to play on their hex maps, paper sheets, flat without terrain. That's something I've never been akin to myself, even since the very early days when when I first started learning how to play BattleTech. I opened up the Battletech compendium and saw the rules for miniature rules and 3D terrain, and I was very interested in that part because at the end of the day, I am myself personally, my own choice and taste. I am an immersion gamer, so I like to be able to see and visualize on the board what it actually is, as opposed to maybe like theater of the mind, imagining it more when it's like a topographic map. So, yeah, we have some cool 3D printed stuff, custom design, scratch build stuff. There's various ways you can do game boards these days. So, one of the things that most people, they get intimidated by the idea of, trying to build something cool like this, like what Les has done. Okay, I'm going to move these out of the way. You guys can see the detail on this. Now, this is 3D printed, okay? It's various different pieces from different designers out there. FDM printing for different various like sports games and sci-fi 6mm. There's different things. There's no one artist or anything like that is the be all end all. You should with the way the world works these days, you can pretty much find anything you want out there for coming up with cool stuff when it comes to 3D printing. So that said, I'll step away from that part of the conversation for building custom scratch built terrain is something that a lot of people enjoy doing. Myself, I love doing that. When it comes to scratch building terrain, it does not take a lot of artistic talent. It's more or less techniques and tricks in order to trick the mind's eye into believing what you're seeing is real. So, when we look at, say, a miniature, right? We look at this atlas and we know that the atlas is supposed to be about 15.5 meters tall from all the lore we've read. Or if you've never seen a battle mech before, you look at it and you're like, that's a giant robot, right? So your eye imagines it, takes it in as it's 2 inches tall, but in your mind, you're actually visualizing as what you would actually think is true scale would be, right? So when painters paint things, they paint things to trick your mind's eye into believing what you're looking at is actually what it should look like in real life if you are actually looking at it. So when you're building terrain or painting miniature or anything like that, the tricks and techniques you use are designed to trick your mind's eye. So you don't have to be Van Gogh and paint everything perfectly. It's a very much different technique than when you're doing 28mm wargaming, because with 28mm wargaming, a marine or a man is this big, and it's got a lot more detail on it. It's like a soldier, they got pouches on it, or maybe it's power armor or whatnot, and you're gonna have a hell of a lot more detail and focus for the eye to look at. At the 6mm or 1/285 scale, 1/265 scale, you don't need to have that level of detail because things are just so much smaller. You just need to give the impression that it's there, okay? So when you're doing terrain, the same thing applies. Terrain's a lot more forgiving when you're painting it and when you're building it than a miniature is when you're painting it, because you can do things like with a ruined building, like in this instance here, right? You can be a lot rougher with the paint job on it. It does not have to be as precise. You can, scuff it up, and your attention to detail as far as, pinpointing where the colors are not as important. You can cover a lot of it up with flocking, and you can cover up a lot with it with like pigments and weathering compounds and whatnot, and you can make it look really cool. And then at the end of it, you can also, do things like add rocks to fill in any gaps or anything you may have on your piece when you put it together. So that said, I'll go to the overhead again here. When you're doing homemade terrain. So homemade terrain can be done in various ways. There's lots of guys on YouTube that can teach you the basics of putting together scratch-built terrain. But before you even get into that part of it, what you need to decide is what is it I need for my wargaming experience? So when it comes to Battletech, what is it you want for your gaming when you're playing on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, whatever your routine is. And the first things first, I would say most people should have something that gives your board or your game board volume. And when I say volume, it needs to have more than just being flat, right? So if you're using, say, the Catalyst hex maps, if you throw buildings on them, it gives it a third dimension, right? It's very important that you get hills on there as well. So if those maps have hills and you're going to scratch build some hex hills, You want to put those on there. That's very important because it'll add that layer of depth to the board and it'll help begin to trick the mind's eye. So when you're building boards for like Alpha Strike, for Alpha Strike Aces, for classic miniature rules, you don't want to just have, this cool piece and then flatness. You want to have some more texture to the board and across it to give a feel of what we perceive to be realistic, right? So hills are very important. Ways you can do hills, obviously you can 3D print hills, but most people who don't 3D print, you're going to want to try and scratch build them, and it's not as challenging as you would think. You can go to your local hobby store. Now you don't have to go to your local hobby store. You can go to your local building supply store, whatever is close to you. There you'll usually be able to find pink foam or blue foam. Uh, Both of those are very affordable. It's usually up here in Canada. I think we can get you can get a 4x2 sheet of it for like $7, and out of that sheet, that's 1 inch thick, you can make numerous hills, and they're very easy to make. You just literally take your magic marker, draw your pattern on it, cut it out with a old kitchen knife or a hobby knife. I would say sneak into the kitchen, take the oldest hobby knife, don't let your wife or your significant other see it, and hack out the rough shape of your hill. And then what you can do is you literally, it's so easy, you can piece them together with white glue. These ones are rocks, and these are made, actually, these rocks I made out of pink foam, are made from the scraps of different hills that I actually made, bigger ones, that you don't often see on the channel here because they're much bigger pieces. They're like big hill pieces. And this was made out of the scraps, and I just glued them together, let them dry overnight, and then literally took that knife and raked it across the pink foam. And the way the blade hits the foam, it just chisels off. Like, I did not carve this. It literally took me like a minute to get that texture on it, and that so it looks like a rock. And after that, literally, just I threw on some what they call Mod Podge. It gives the pink foam like a hard plastic seal. It's like an antique varnish. It gives it like a hard plastic seal. That way you can use like spray aerosols on it for like gray primer or whatever. And literally, dollar store, craft paint, dry brush it up, 3 different layers of colors. Put a little bit of white glue on there, threw some flock on it to give it a little bit of grass or moss texture. Done. Like, it was done in like, I don't know, it took longer for the glue to dry than it did to actually carve these pieces out. And they're just all the scraps. So, it's not that tough. The same thing would be happening with if you're making actual grass hills. You're making grass hills, literally the same thing. You can rock edge them, leave the tops flat, put on maybe a mixture of dirt and glue, let it dry overnight, and then literally just after you've Mod Podged it, you can just spray rattle can it and then dry brush it and then add your flocking. Flocking is nice and easy. Literally, you just water and glue mixture 50-50 and sprinkle your flock on. As far as getting the flock to look really cool and realistic, don't go with one color, blend it a little bit, right? Where the areas where you think the sun would naturally dry out the grass a little more, like the centerpieces of the highest peaks on a hill or a mountain, you want to have it like a burnt color or a lighter green. And then in the areas where the shade would be, you want it more of like a darker green where it's going to not be exposed to the sun so much. And then again, that leads to the process of tricking the mind's eye, right? The other things you can do, again, 3D printing, or you can buy store-bought terrain depending on what your budget is. There's all various sets out there that you can get your hands on. I would suggest, ultimately, building stuff yourself is much more hobby oriented, much more fulfilling if you got the time. It adds an element to the game that is not just playing the game. You're actually being creative and painting outside of the mechs, right? So as far as that goes, hills are important. They help give that board the volume that I've discussed. The next most important thing probably you're going to want are these things here, trees. So trees are probably the single most important piece you're going to put on any game board. The reason being is that this is actually what's going to take your board from looking like a bunch of plastic or carved toy buildings or hills and rocks into making it look real. One of the things that a lot of people take for granted, even living in big cities, is that trees are everywhere. They're literally everywhere. I can't go down the street without seeing 100 trees. You don't normally notice it because you're so used to it, you've become benign to them. But they're there. And when you plop trees down on the game board, the mind's eye sees what it thinks it's supposed to see on a regular basis, and all of a sudden your little toy buildings start to become realistic in your mind's eye, and people are going, oh my god, that looks amazing, and really you really haven't done anything other than put a couple of trees on the board. Okay, trees are gold. They are pure gold. um, what do we got here? Beskar, how you doing tonight, buddy? um, you see trees, I see inferno ammunition. Yes. So trees are actually really easy to come by. Now I know people, you can buy them, and I would suggest making them. Making them, A, they look better than most of the store-bought stuff. B, they're much more durable. C, you can have them, design them and build them to the specs that you find the most what's the word, positive to your own gaming experience. So whatever it is you're going to be doing with them, you can make them fit your game board and the environments that you're going to put them in. Easy way to make these. So these ones here, there's various different companies out there that make like the trees and sell the clump foliage. These are some of those, and those are for model trains. Okay. What I did with those is I just bought the set and flocked them, and then of course I went online and you can buy these little wooden hex bases. You probably get about 100 of them for like $10 or something like that, and just flock, glue them, drill a little hole, epoxy, pop these trees into them, let them dry overnight, and I've had these going now. These ones here have traveled to every convention in the last 4 years, back and forth from Toronto to Cambridge to the studio, 2 or 3 times a week, and they're tough. They're tough. They're only now starting to a little bit lose the flocking off them, and that's easy to repair. So those are the store-bought ones that have been tweaked to fit Battletech. The other ones, I should have grabbed one that doesn't have any flocking on it. Are these small ones here? These small ones here are the cheapest trees I could find on Amazon. I think I got like 200 of them for like $20. They look like cheap plastic toys. If you were to peruse the internet and look for model train trees, these are the worst trees you can possibly find. They're so cheap, but you get a lot of them and you can tweak them. And all I did with these, again, same thing, wooden hex base. You get 100 of them for like $10, right? You base it with some flocking and glue. But I went and took Hobby Tack, which is a adhesive that you can get from most hobby stores or model train stores that's used specifically for clump foliage. You apply it to the cheap plastic branches and leaves that are on this, and you literally just dump it into the foliage, let it dry and set for a night, usually is what I did, overnight. And then like Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, a couple days later, I was pruning tiny cherry trees, and I sat in front of the TV, watched Monday Night Football, and was just pruning off the excess. And these things, again, they are tough as nails. Our guys are pretty rough with them. The general public's really rough with them. Kids are rough with them, and they survive and they look cool. And I have hundreds of them. And these trees, what we do with them is not only do we build little forests and wooded areas with them, we actually put them between the buildings in our city builds. And those trees make all the difference between toy buildings and what looks like a little architecture display. And when we're at conventions, most of the conventions we go to, yes, they're nerd culture, but they are not gaming conventions. So most of the people that are walking by are not gamers, first and foremost. Maybe they might play Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, or they might know of games, but they're there to see, B-movie actors and comic book artists and video game things, and they walk by and they see our display and they're like, what is that? Yeah, and it draws them in right away, and then we hook them, right? We're like, hey, we got toy robots here. You want to blow stuff up? Look at this cool board, right? And those trees are the key to success. Okay, it's the small details that most of the time all of us take for granted, just like we take for granted trees and outside in our own neighborhoods. We don't really pay attention to them very often. But when you have a lot of them on the board, as long as you create good shooting lanes, they add an element of realism that takes your board from toys to over the top. Okay, I've rambled on a lot here about that. What do we got? Kermindi, good evening. How are you? Um, yeah, you can actually you can buy the wooden bases from pretty much anybody. There's lots of no-name companies out there that make those little cheap wooden bases, and they're amazing. You'll probably even find guys in your local area that have laser cutters and make stuff like that. That's how we made our little movement tokens. One of the local guys, he made all these nice little tokens for us for real cheap. Instead of having our board littered with dice, we have these little tokens, right? And you can keep them the wood color, you can paint them, little things like that. Little details that help add to the immersion when you're playing, right? So anyways, back to board builds. So you got your trees, you got your hills. That'll give you the volume that you need to make your board look cool. After that, you want to start getting into the cool stuff, right? That's the your what can we call it? We call like city walls or you know towers, small buildings, warehouses, actual buildings, city buildings, bunkers, turrets, all the cool stuff that everybody's like, okay, that's the stuff I need to have a really cool scenario, right? That's your filler terrain, that's your high detail stuff. That's what you're going to build the basis of your scenarios around. But you need that after you have everything else that actually creates the world, because building a game board, usually when I do this, it takes me about an hour to an hour and a half to do it. And some people will be like, oh, why would you do that to yourself? Well, building the game board is part of the fun for me. I have just as much fun creating and setting the scene as I do actually playing the game. It's like you're the cinematographer, right? You're setting the stage for which all your friends are going to have this immersive experience of playing with, whether it's Battletech robots, Dungeons and Dragons miniatures. It could be anything. Shadowrun miniatures. It could be a cyberpunk city. It could be anything. Taking the time to do it and learning to do it and learning to enjoy it. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. It's not for everybody, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and that's why I'm sitting here talking to you about it, right? But setting the scene will change the game from just a board game to that little architecture display that complete strangers at Fan Expo or Gen Con or Origins or at the Canadian National Exhibition or at Anime North, where all these conventions we go to, walk by and go, hey, that looks cool. They get hooked on it. And then when I tell them, oh, I would never be able to afford all that, it's like, it's not that expensive. Most of our board builds come in under $100 Canadian. Look, I don't want to go blow all my money on this stuff. I want to be able to do it as cost effective as possible. Like I said, $7 for a piece of pink foam, you're making an entire board's worth of hills. For $20, I made, or maybe call it $30. I made 200 trees. You get into some of the gaming mat is more. Probably you're going to be your most expensive piece. Most gaming mats in Canada are, for a 4x4, about $75 to $100. Or if you get a 6x4, they're about $125 to $150, right? In the US, you're about 30% less, right? That's probably your most expensive piece. And when you're playing Battletech's not an expensive game. So you can have some of that extra budget. That, say, if you're playing some other games that are more expensive and you're into Battletech, well, you can put that into creating some cool scenery to have that immersive game experience with your friends. So, anyways, back to building this board here. I'll go check the chat here real quick. Yeah, rambling in my old age, buddy. And I see that's a terrain board, and the cost is less than a Magic deck. Yes, Andrew. Um, keeping things within people's budget is very important. You got to remember, like, you know, there's people are all at different points of their life, right? When you're younger and you're a gamer, you got, you're at school, maybe you're still in high school and whatnot, and your parents are, paying for your through your allowance, or you got a part-time job working after school, or if you're in university, same thing, right? You're on a university budget, you don't have extra couple of $100 to throw away every month to buy plastic toys, right? And when you get older and you get married, you got kids you got to worry about, you got mouths to feed, you got mortgages to pay, and then you get to my age and it's all over, and you got some expendable income, then those guys are able to, buy some of the cool stuff. Well, you should be able to have the cool stuff too, regardless of what point in life you are. So, there's different ways to get around that, and I'm going to talk about those tonight, right? So, keeping things cheap is very important to me. Because I don't want people to be intimidated by what they see, right? If they come and see us at a convention, I want them to walk away going, I can take part in that too, regardless of where I am in life. So what I'm doing here right now is I've set up this back wall. This is going to be kind of like the old outside part of the stadium. So the fans would filter in, they come around to the opposite side here, and you can see in. You get the dilapidated stadiums, and I've added some rocks. So these rocks here, I just got them at the dollar store. It's something I've been doing off and on for a long time. I got back into doing, actually, was Aaron from Death From Above Wargaming. Friends with him. His board builds, he does a similar thing with them. And I was like, you know what? I need some filler terrain to fill in the cracks, because when you make all this stuff, it doesn't always fit together perfectly or seamlessly, go together, right? So I'm using pieces from different sets here, and you can see what I'm going to do is they don't naturally join together. So how I hide that would be through the rocks, or I will add a tree in there, right? And then when people walk by and look at it, it looks kind of natural, right? I'm hiding the imperfections of the board build, so it looks like it's supposed to be like that. In this case, we're going to try and make an overgrown area. I'm going to add, like, you guys can see here, I got a whole box of these rocks that I had carved out from the hills that I originally made. I've got a bunch of these hills here that I've made in 3D printed and made look like they're all weathered and whatnot. I'm going to use those to actually build what would be the outfield wall for the baseball stadium here. Let's go back here quick to the chat. The good thing about the ungridded mats, they can really be reused a lot. Yeah, 100%. I like the gridded mats. So when we normally play classic Battletech, even though we're playing miniature rules, we generally use the hexed map. And when I have pieces that don't have hexes on them, what I do with them is I put them on there, no problem. We do it all the time. And we can either we'll dummy it, we'll eyeball it, and go, okay, that's however many hexes, or we can see from start to finish on one side of the piece. The other thing you can do, nice and easy, and it's a cheat code, is you can take those wooden hex bases that you bought and got 100 of them for like a dime each, and make yourself a little hex ruler. And just glue them together with crazy glue or the glue gun, and all of a sudden you got a hex ruler, and you can measure across your unhexed terrain features. And then there's no ambiguity. For those, because I know there's lots of guys out there like gaming, they want precise, so it has to be the way it is. So you make the quick little hex ruler, and everybody's happy. All right, so on this build here, I'm going to probably put a lot of trees, a bunch of rocks, and maybe a lot of rubble, the scatter rubble here. I've got a bunch of this stuff here I'm going to grab. So I'll put some of those light stands up at the back as well. So I'll grab the rocks out from behind. I actually have the rocks propping up some of the stuff you guys see in the background screen of the studio that hold up the game boxes and whatnot. That's where I hide all this stuff when necessary. So I'm going to build this outfield wall here. Any questions or anything like that while I'm doing this? As I've been rambling for the last half hour. incoherently like an old man on Halloween night who's got empty nest syndrome, even though my daughter does live here at the studio, and she's, I think, at her boyfriend's place in Toronto for the weekend, or probably out at a Halloween party doing cool stuff. I'm like, Dad, doing nerd stuff on a Thursday night. I'll cover this up here with trees. And when I say I got a lot of trees, I'll tell you, this is just like one tub of them. I got a bunch. So we'll use those to spruce up the board. I've made trees for, what's the most time-consuming part of the board building? For me, being OCD about how it looks. That's the most consuming time part of it. When you enjoy it, it doesn't feel like it's taking forever. You feel like you're actually building a hobby piece. The guys, make fun of me, the Fox crew, and even Tommy and whatnot when they're out with us at conventions, and Josh and whatnot, watching me do it. They're like, "Can I help?" And everybody's like, "No, just let him do his thing," right? And I have as much fun as I'm not joking. Like, I have as much fun doing that as everybody else is, teaching people how to play the game and rolling dice and blowing mechs up. But no, there's no real time-consuming part of it. Unloading it from the truck probably take the most time-consuming part of it. Put this in the back here. We'll make this a little less angled. So these hills are modular. They snap and click together, so you can change the angles on them. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm just going to make this, it's probably a little too far out. Take that apart there. Like so. And I'm going to make it look like it's destroyed. Just like I'm going to destroy Jesse's mechs tomorrow night in this stadium. Because nobody defeats me when it comes to Solaris. What's the best board you've made and why? So the best board I think I've ever made has been our jungle boards. The jungle boards we did are pretty extensive. We have, so you see all these trees here. These are like coniferous trees and whatnot, but I also use them as filler foliage for our jungle boards. Now, I have probably close to 600 different trees when it comes to all these game boards that we do, that I've made. And the jungle ones are probably the most delicate out of them all, but they're also the coolest because they're the sequoia trees. And we 3D printed all the trunks from them. We actually, Les and I found somebody making like Halloween haunted trees, and we just shrunk them down and printed them, and they were like all like no foliage on them, right? And we had to flock them ourselves. And what we did for that, and I'm just covering up that end piece there with a clump of foliage, looks like a bush, and it's golden. We we used to go to all the different craft stores, Les and I, and for those of you who've seen Les on the show here before, he was here on Saturday with us doing a game called Dracula's America. Him and I have been friends for quite a number of years, and we love doing painting and building and doing terrain. He's actually one of the best commission painters in the country. This guy is he's phenomenal. He puts me to shame. I'm pretty good, and he's really good. And I learned a lot from him over the years. And he and I would go to like Michael's or whatever, and we'd be standing in the flower section where they sell all the fake flowers, and amongst the baby's breath and things like that. And you got me, who looks like he's out of a heavy metal band, in my biker jacket with a bandana on. I got chains hanging off my jeans. I'm wearing a pair of Doc Martens, and Les is there dressed like a baseball coach, and the two of us are arguing over, what kind of little flowers are going to look best. And people don't have no context to what is going on watching us, and it's it's and we look up and we see, and there'll be like 10 or 15 people looking at us like, what is wrong with you two? And nothing's wrong with us. We're nerds, right? So that jungle board, we ended up doing, what we did was we went to the dollar store. We couldn't find what we wanted at the actual craft store. We if you go to in Canada, it's called Dollarama. In the U.S., I think it's Dollar Tree. I can assure you they probably have a similar thing. Go to the cheap fake flower section at your local dollar store. Go in the back and grab the baby's breath. You can pluck all those little individual leaves, or leaves, not leaves, off of the baby's breath. They cost like $2 for an entire, like a 6-foot vine of the things. I have more baggies of jungle foliage at home from this that'll last me a lifetime for like $5 or $6. And we made an entire board full of foliage, using these little wooden hex bases, look like giant jungle leaves, pieces. We actually have some 3D printed ruined mechs that are covered in it. Like, this is all dollar store. Like, it's nothing expensive. It just looks really, really cool. I can zoom in on that. Focus? No focus? You guys can't quite see. It's not focus. Focusing on my beautiful face is what the problem is. But so sorry. The dollar store is your best friend. The dollar store is going to get you all this cool stuff for really cheap. So if you're looking at this piece right now, right here, I would say cost-wise, like the parts that we 3D printed, there's not much FDM there. Like, literally, this piece might have cost, with the trees and the foliage on it right now, maybe $40, maximum $40. And you got something that's like a centerpiece for a massive game board for essentially an evening's worth of pizza and beer, right? Really, really cheap. But anyways, yeah, back to the jungle board. So the jungle board, what we did was I had a bunch of failed 3D prints. I don't like wasting anything. These failed 3D prints had a lot of layer lines on them. And I couldn't just leave them and paint them as they were, because they would just have looked horrible, especially if I started dry brushing them. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to waste this stuff. There's got to be a way that we can salvage it. And the idea lesson I came up with was, we're going to make a jungle board, and I am going to cover all these damaged buildings, like, not damaged, but they just have a lot of layer lines on them, with vines and foliage and overgrowth and some damage. And that's what we did. And that, ironically, that was the very first board that Fox Network ever took to a convention back in 2022, just after the pandemic. We were at Breakout Con, and we built this board out of what most people would have thrown in the garbage, because it didn't look very good until we literally spruced it up, similar to what Les has done here, and made it into this overgrown mess. So we had to make a lot of trees. That was a time-consuming process, making the trees, but it was a lot of fun. So I would have to say, I have pictures of it. If you guys follow us on Instagram or on the Facebook page for Fox Network, we'll post some more pictures up of it. I think there are some on there already. It's pretty extensive. We did use it again last Halloween, actually, this time last year, ironically, at the Anime North Halloween party, which we just did last Friday. We did a scenario called The Clearing, and I based that on the Clan Wolverine burial mound that from when they got annihilated by the Widowmakers, I believe it was. And we did it on a jungle world, and we made Les made a nice centerpiece for me. It was a 3D printed Mayan temple that was designed for like some fantasy game. We altered the dimensions on it, so it made it down into mech scale, or 1/265, 1/285 scale, and we only used like the top half of it, and it made a big temple right in the middle of the board, and we covered it with foliage and all the jungle trees we made with the hills, and then these smaller trees that I just took off the board we used as filler. The thing was just wild. Now, that board probably took longer to put up than any other boards because there's just so many trees, and you want to be gracious with the trees and your line of sight when you're building your boards. And that was the next thing I was going to talk about was, it's one thing to make a cool board or make a cool game piece, but at the end of the day, the miniatures you use for game pieces, whether you 3D print them or scratch build them or however buy them in a store, they need to have a high level of playability as a game board. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there that looks ultra realistic, but when you put it on the board, it's either too tall or so big that it makes it difficult to navigate around while you're playing the game, right? So city buildings are a good example for this, right? So you got lots of different manufacturers out there to make different sizes of buildings and whatnot, and I love the big buildings. Don't get me wrong, I'm all about immersion and true scale, but when you're using it as a game piece, makes it difficult. You're trying to get your hand into the city street. You're knocking things over. You're bumping into it, and when you hit something that big, it generally will knock other pieces on your game board out of the way, which is not cool because now you got to stop and fix it. So, smaller-ish buildings tend to be better. Just because you can get your hands around it and you can get in and amongst the board and interact with the game at a much more successful rate than with the cooler pieces that are big. The big pieces are great for dioramas and photographs and setting something up that people can just look at as a display. So like this piece here, when you're looking at it, you can see that it's much smaller. The city walls, they're about 4 inches tall, maybe 5. You can get your hands in and around it. You can move miniatures around it without banging. If you bang into it, it's not going to knock stuff over. But playability is a very, very important aspect to board building. In addition to not only having your game boards and the scale of the pieces you're using compatible with what you're trying to achieve as far as the gameplay goes, you also need to take into consideration the playability of how you've set it up on the table. So there's multiple different ways of doing things. Like if you have a specific scenario, sometimes the scenario is going to call for the board to be set up a particular way, and it might not be equal for both factions or 3 factions or 4 factions, whatever's taking part in the fight. Sometimes it's designed to be an uphill battle for a struggle for one side. But if you're playing just pickup games where you're trying to keep things even-steven, for both sides, so it's fair, so that everybody has an equal chance to win, you want to make sure that you're creating equal levels of terrain cover on each side of the board. You want to make sure that you're creating lanes of fire for people to be able to shoot in. So, you don't want to just create a board that's so dense that anybody with long-range weapons is going to be at an extreme disadvantage when they show up, right? And then the guy who's got all the short-range stuff is able to get in close, and he's in under minimum range for like LRM boats and stuff like that, and then it's just an unfun gaming experience for the other side. So you want to take that into consideration when you're building the board. Make sure you got lots of cool opening lanes. Make sure the board accommodates what everybody's bringing, if you can, if it's just a pickup game. Now, if it's a scenario game, that's a whole different story. You're setting the scene to tell a tale, and the players are bringing units specifically to take part in that objective, so they should come equipped to deal with what's coming, and they should have a good idea as to what it is they're going to see, right? So when I run scenarios, or used to run scenarios, I don't really get to do it very often anymore with just our friends and our play group, I would tell the guys, okay, you're going to be doing X. There's going to be 4 objectives on the board. You're going to have to take 2 warehouses before you can create a beachhead. And once you got the beachhead established, you can move your assets or your tanks and whatnot in, and then you can bring in your assault units, and then you can storm the city walls and make a siege. And those objectives would have to be attained before they can get to the next part. They couldn't just do things out of order. So they knew when they were coming in, they're going to need short range fighters for the first part of the fight. Then they're going to need their LRM boats and their LRM carriers or artillery or aerospace to deal with, the sieging part of the city, to enter the city along those lines. And the board would be built to match that. So it's very important. Make sure your game boards are not just cool looking, but they're very playable as well. What's console? These scenario parameters appear acceptable. Thank you, James. How big of a board do you recommend? So it depends on what game you're playing. The Sky's Inheritance will be terrain and miniatures, most likely. Before I answer that question, so Sky's mother was here. I'm very good friend. I'm best of friends with my ex-wife. So I've been divorced for 20 years. We're a big happy Brady Bunch kind of family. And she came down to the studio last week with Tuck and me to come in and surprise Sky for dinner that night. And she came into the studio she'd been in here before, but she actually stopped and was looking at everything in here. And she looked at all the miniatures on the table, and she's like, "How much is all this worth?" And Tuck and I looked at each other, and I was like, "You know what? I never stopped to think about that." And there's Henny and I a couple weekends before, we actually counted up everything here. There was about 400 miniatures in here, just on the table. And we were looking. I was like, well, she goes, but painted. Like if they're $8 each, roughly, or $7 each, that's easy math. But she goes, as they are, like, painted. And I'm like, well, generally speaking, you probably get about $30 a miniature, roughly. So you can do the math. And she's like, "You're telling me there's like over $100,000 worth of miniatures here?" I'm like, "Apparently there is." So we sort of lock in the studio. No, but to go back to the questions, the game boards, depending on what game you're playing. So in the studio, we used to use a 6x4. I changed it to a 4x4 because I wanted the extra space on the side for things like aces cards, dice trays, movement counters, the battlefield support decks, other miniatures, turn counters, anything, pens, paper, asset cards, all that fun stuff. So a 4x4 for Alpha Strike and aces is pretty good. The con to that is that it forces the game to basically be played at medium range or short range for its entirety. So that will create a meta for you and your players. Just understand that and be warned on that. If you're playing a 4x4, it will meta the mechs to anything that's 4-5 short medium or anything like that. Long range weapons, basically, you don't even consider them anymore. If you go by a 6x4, obviously long range weapons are going to make a difference. For classic Battletech, for miniature rules, I am a big fan of doing the following: a 4x4 board, but with classic miniature rules, using double movement, double ranges. And you pay 2 for a facing change. When you do that, the game changes for the better, in my opinion. I've been playing 34 years. I'll say this. When we play games on a standard hex map where it's a 30-meter hex instead of a 15-meter hex, and you say you play on 2 of them, which most people do, heavies and assaults tend to become the meta because there is less room to operate in general on the boards. A lot of the hex maps are very densely terrained. There's not a lot of open ones. A lot of them have a lot of terrain on them. And what it does is that when you see people post pictures online of the battles they're having, it always inevitably turns into this. By turn 3, this is your game board. there's a dance party going on in the middle of the board. It's a Congo line, and you got everybody punching and kicking each other in the back of the guy in front of them. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning at a wedding, and your grandfather's leading the dance around the dance hall, right? When you when you change it to miniature rules, even using the hexes, and you go to a 4x4 board, what happens is that your light mechs and your medium mechs all of a sudden become on par, more so, with the heavies and the assaults. Why? They're able to maneuver in still the same space technically, but with far greater agility, because you've shortened up how big a hex is. They're able to do more in that tight space, so their maneuverability pays off more, and they start to actually behave a lot more closer to the lore and the canon, in my opinion. You're free to disagree with me on this, than they do when you're going one for one. That was a big reason why we went to the double rules way many years ago. Of all the miniatures we have, to give you an example of this, the mech miniature that we have that has the most kills in the last 7 years is one of the very first miniatures less painted for Battletech when he got back into the game. And it is this Lyran Guard Locust. This Locust has 14 kills. And that's because he's able to get behind people. He's able to, or they are able to get behind whoever they want on a regular, consistent basis, and whoever seems to be controlling that mech is incredibly lucky with dice rolls. Even Talon, like Talon was here for the end of the Kickstarter last April, and he had that miniature and another one, and we routed the clans with locusts and inner sphere mechs, playing aces when it was still in its infancy. That mech and the other locusts we have are just they're blessed, they're gifted, they're charmed, whatever you want to call them. But it boils down to that when you play classic miniature rules or Alpha Strike, the mediums and lights get to function more like they are intended to in the lore than they do when it's at 1 hex equals 30 meters. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree with that all you want. In the comments, I have no issues debating that until next year. But yeah, so a 48 by 48 with the miniature rules is great. I suggest using miniature rules with hexes. I'm just going to go back here to the questions here. Scenario parameters susceptible. Hexagonal grid is preferable in honorable combat. For Warhammer 40k tabletop, I just got my first minis this week. Lyran Locust is such a concept possible, yeah, apparently. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of the hexes with miniature rules, and there's 2 reasons for hexes instead of tape measures. One, no ambiguity. You can count, you can pre-measure without using a tape measure and slowing up the game. 2, the tape measure is not knocking things over, to our 40k players out there, you know what it's like. You're knocking into things, you're trying to measure it, trying to get across, you can hit the guy's miniature, whatever, and then the guy who built all the terrains having a moment, watching you destroy it. Secondly, hexes allow for a lot of the cool rules in Battletech. So your artillery strikes, hidden units, minefields, artillery, airstrikes, bombing raids, all sorts of cool things. It's a place where you can hide your urban mech to ambush somebody. Instead of trying to, you can write down a hex number, or you can count off the spaces if it's an unnumbered hex sheet. That allows you all those cool layers and depths of advanced Battletech. Desgra, yes, right. It is very much so. So they got their own severe. Yep. All right, so back to the board here. I'm gonna get some rock terrain in here. What do you guys think? What else should we add in here? I think we should put some turrets in here for Jesse and I tomorrow. How does that sound? We can shoot each other with turrets. I got another failed 3D print and I made it into a damaged, destroyed turret. I don't like wasting anything. Where can we put these? I'm going to put a turret outside the wall there that can shoot at us, and we can put another one here, and I will cover that up with a small tree. Now, one of the things we do too, I was talking about the trees. We don't use wooded hexes. A tree is a tree when because we play true scale. So our house rule, while it's a house rule, doesn't actually change classic Battletech's concept for their rule. What we do is you can move through the tree. Okay, you can pass through it by paying the movement normally. Okay, so you pay double to go through it like you would in a classic map sheet. You cannot finish your movement in the tree hex, though. We're saying is that that's a real tree. You want it gone, you need to destroy it. So in order to simulate what a wooded hex would do is that if you are base to base with the tree on our board, you get 1 point of cover from, say, the pouncer to the dasher here, right? You get 1 point of cover. I'll flip over to this side, you can see it better, right? So here's the pouncer. The dasher's hiding behind it. He would play +1 for that light woods to fire through it. If the dasher from this side here was firing at the pouncer, what we say is because he's base to base with the tree, it's similar to standing at the edge of the wooded hex on a map sheet. You don't pay the +1 to fire through it. Now, if he was 1 inch away from it, he would. Okay, and that's how we simulate it, where we don't have to be constantly moving trees off the board, or pushing it out of the way to show that the guy's in there. It's the tree's there. You can't walk. You can walk past it. You can pay the double movement to walk past it, but you can't actually stand in it. You have to either destroy it, or stand behind it, or in front of it. And the tree will only block LOS if it actually blocks 50% or more of the miniature, depending on where it is. So we build actual forests on the board, and we'll space them out. And what you'll find is that if you space them out exactly 1 hex apart on a gridded board, if you make your way through the wooded trees, it works out the same as paying the double movement with all your facing changes, walking through that little hexed area. So it all comes out in the wash, and it gives you a level of immersion. Some people are not going to like that. That's a matter of taste. But if you want the rule of cool and you want your board to look real, that's how we do it, and that's how we avoid having, arguments and disputes over who can see what and when they can see it. What else have we got for questions here? Yeah, so Hero Escape, the Hero Escape stuff. Okay, so I'll walk back one question. I have found that when using Hero Escape tiles to use the miniature trees, their visual indicator, using small tokens. Yeah. So one of the things I've seen done in the past that you can do is if you're using hex spaces and you want to step into the tree, you can actually take the tree off the board and put it on the unit's Alpha Strike card or on its map sheet to show that it's in the woods, and then when it moves out of it, you just put it back. It's another way you can do it. I don't like handling the terrain that much myself, and because we're always usually out in public with people who are not necessarily always delicate, or there's little kids that want to. Of course, little kids see it, they want to touch stuff. So we try to child-proof this stuff as much as possible to make it durable, because kids are kids. We just say don't move it, and it took maybe a week to get used to it. But yeah, I strongly suggest, if you're gonna go miniature rules, use the hexes. The hexes are fantastic. You'll have a lot of fun with it. If you go 1 for 1, here's another trick too. When you're actually making your terrain, so everything we do is true scale or as close to it as possible. When I started building stuff, so if you take, say, the Atlas, right? Now, If you do have the new Universe book at home, I think it's like in the second chapter, or maybe the third, I can't remember. There is a couple of pages where there are some images, and it's kind of like an impromptu scale chart. And it shows a mech and an infantryman and an elemental and interceptor power armor, and then a drop ship and a Shrek PPC carrier, and then a capital ship. And it actually gives the dimensions and their height on the picture. So an atlas, according to Catalyst now, is 15.4 meters tall. Okay. If you measure this, it's about 2 inches plus. Okay. Roughly, if you're going true scale for these miniatures, if you want to use like a little I can't remember what those little digital measuring things are. 1 inch in the scale that Battletech in is roughly 7.5 meters. So if you wanted to go complete true scale with your measurements and everything, you would quadruple. Okay. Now, Battletech's designed to be played on your kitchen table. That's why one hex is 30 meters instead of having massive game boards. But when you're scaling things, if you understand that one hex or 1 inch is roughly 7.5 meters of real scale, you can build things correctly, right? So the trees that we have are about, 7.5 meters is about 30 feet tall. That's about the same size as a tree that you would have in your front lawn in a subdivision. The bigger trees are more like the ones that are like 2.5 inches tall, 2 to 2.5 inches tall, or like what you would find in a forest. You can then go, your bigger trees are heavy woods +2, your smaller trees are light woods +1. Generally speaking, we don't even do that. We just go +1 across the board because we put enough trees on the board that you get lots of +2 and +3 mods. So back to the Heroscape. So Heroscape, I'm not a fan of it myself. I understand why people enjoy it because it's got a lot of flexibility. I just don't like the aesthetic of it myself personally. I always feel like I'm looking at a Tetris board when I see Heroscape. Hence why, I use some of the other stuff. And I don't really want to talk good or bad about anybody's products, especially third-party stuff. I think you should use whatever you feel comfortable with and whatever it is you enjoy. I'm here just to give you some ideas, as to how I do things, how we make the presentations we do, and things that you can do with anybody's product, even your own, to achieve those same results, right? So, all right, we'll get back to the board build here. So in the outfield, I got some rocks, I got some hills here. Let's use some of the hills that we got, and we'll give this board the volume I talked about. I might put a couple of warehouses out here too. And I got 2 more turrets. Where's those other 2 turrets hiding on me? Where'd I put them? There they are. So I'll put a couple of turrets over here. I'll have them on Jesse's side of the board, and I'll hide them so he doesn't see them. And that way, I just get a free couple of shots on them to start the game. I'll put that there. I could go like that. Generally, what I do with these hills, these hex hills, I'll put a rock beside them when I'm not using hexes on the table, just to break up the idea that they have hexes on them. And again, to trick the mind's eye. Like so. Pop that there. And I'll put some trees in between those as well. What's wrong with Tetris? Tetris, nothing wrong with Tetris. It's just my personal taste, right? I want to see something that I think is real, and that goes back. It's like that. I'm like that with D&D as well and other role-playing games. I'm a big Call of Cthulhu fan, right? I love Call of Cthulhu. So we even have a bunch of tiles made for Call of Cthulhu and miniatures for that as well, just because we're nerds that way and we want the rule of cool factor whenever we play anything, and I want people to look at it and go, yeah, you're a nerd, but that's cool stuff, so it's acceptable, right? All right. So What's the for those of you out there that do your own board builds? What is it you enjoy the most of it out of the viewers here? What fun do you have? What boards do you enjoy making the most? You go like a light tower here. I wish I had a scoreboard. That would be pretty cool. We can put an elevator. Actually, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an elevator back here that can be activated by somebody. We'll come up with a rule for it. I got some little walls that we can put around this. Is that the top? That's the bottom. What is this? That's the... We'll go like this. The beauty of having the big screen on the gaming table is I can see how centered things are through the overhead camera. I don't need that. We'll have an elevator there. Okay. That there. Some more rocks in the backside. Smaller hill there. Blend it together with some trees. Cover up that gap with some bushes. What else we got? Any more questions from anybody? When we're sitting here hanging out. Creating an urban battlefield, when you have many vertical changes, the 3D terrain makes a large difference in both tactical assessment and getting a feeling how close and drastic cover you have. Yeah, so cover is a big thing, especially with the Aces AI system. The Aces cards like to use cover. The decks are very intelligent that way. So in city fights, they will be taking partial cover almost like every time, just like a human player would, which is a good thing. It's not often very reckless as far as its nature is in that capacity. So when you have a city board or an urban environment, it's very important to have lots of cool features in there. Whether they're buildings or they're those trees I was talking about, or fountains or statues or things like that. There's some cool stuff out there to make statues. If you go to again back to the dollar store, grab one of the ideas that I've got. I haven't executed it yet. Is I am going to make some pedestals that have like a wooden hex on the top of them, and like these turrets, where a miniature can fit on the top, like a statue, and things like your proliferation cycle pack, which may have units in there that you may or may not ever use, or have a list to put them in. You can make statues out of those old mechs, old iconic mechs that are like the NEIS War Museum or whatever in a city build on New Avalon, or something along those lines, right? Very cool, very easy to make. It's all dry brushing. You can bronze the miniature with gold paint or whatever, and use it for something cool. Or if you want to be really sadistic, you can put actual miniatures on there and create scenarios where people activate the mech, say like in like the periphery states where pirates are ambushing people, things like that. Have fun with it, right? Different ways to use different things, create something a little different here and there. When you're piecing together game boards and stories. Often too with our game boards are a very integral part of the story. You guys have probably seen, I have a giant mountain that you've witnessed probably on different shows. That mountain was designed and built. It's partially 3D printed with hex hills, and the other part of it is hand sculpted. And the part of it that's hand sculpted is the actual mountain. I carved it like I did these rocks. And that was made for a specific scenario that everybody knows, and that was the Helm Memory Core um, scenario where they were coming out of the mountain range. So the Grey Death Legion was coming out fighting the 12th Atrian Dragoons, and we got a bunch of the Atrian Dragoons here, longbows and thunderbolts and riflemen from the original scenario pack that Catalyst released many moons ago. And we adapted it to Alpha Strike, and we used that mountain for it. And that mountain was like the integral part of the entire scenario, right? So that's often, when we're coming up with something cool like this, right? This was for Critter Tech originally. We need a baseball diamond for them. Then we can use it for things like Solaris Arenas. We're eventually going to play a baseball game. I promise you this. Tommy and I will play a mech baseball game. Why? Because it's fun. And because it'll probably be cheesy, stupid, and it'll be worth a lot of laughs. But yeah, your pieces, you want them to be an integral part of the story. We have another board build that I did that was for Rhonda Snord and Wayne Waco. Story we made up about actually it was Tex. Tex said to me, he's like, you should do a bank heist scenario. And I'm like, okay. So how I came up with a bank heist, and the story was, Rhonda Snord gets duped by the Curetans into working with Wayne Waco to go hit a Brian cache full of gold bullion. So I had to make this Brian cache. And again, I took a piece from one designer and then built around it with hand sculpted and carved pink foam, a mountain range, and I put the Brian cache right into it. It's modular, so I can take the piece out and use it for its intended purpose on another board, or I can pop it in there and create this cool mountain. And then when it's out, I have this mountain valley that I can use for something completely different. It's a pass. You can shoot into it. You can hide in there. It's pretty cool, right? So, and again, all those pieces were the center points of the scenarios that we were running. It's enjoyable so much. Yeah, 3D printed Billings, type battle together. Yeah. What is the story created thus far for the game board? So, well, tonight we're making this board. You guys give me your 2 cents as to what Jesse and I should be fighting for. Obviously, it's a Solaris arena, so we're going to do a Solaris fight tomorrow. I don't even know what the mechs are going to be. You guys can actually come up with mechs. I got about 400 of them here. We should be able to come up with pretty much anything. There's not very many unpainted miniatures that I have from any of the models. So feel free to help me create this story for tomorrow. We got the stadium. We got an elevator, so we're going to need some sort of special rules for an elevator piece. Maybe one of us starts by coming up, or if you go on the elevator, maybe you can appear on the other side of the board, because I do have another elevator piece in the other room, I believe, that we can put out there. I'll put this damaged turret out here, and we'll cover up part of it with trees, and we're good. Always a Timberwolf. The clans don't like fighting in Solaris, though. We've got to have, dishonorable inner sphere scum. I'll tell you the factions we have here. On the table, we have a battalion of Waco's Rangers. We have a company of Hanson's Rough Riders. We have a company of Northwind Highlanders. We have 2 lances of Merrick Militia. We have Lancevander, a full reinforced company of the Yellow and Gold. We have a full cannon company of the original Grey Death Legion. We have a full company of the 12th Atrian Dragoons. We have a full battalion of Draconis Combine, both First Sort of Light and Darren regulars. We have a reinforced company of the Word of Blake. We have a reinforced company of Crucius Lancers. We have a reinforced company of the 9th FedCom RCT. We have a Lance. We have Ronda Sword's Command Lance. We have a full company of the command of Wolf's Dragoons, including Jamie Wolf. That's on the Inner Sphere side. Oh, we have my Merc units, but those are custom builds, and most of them are lambs. I don't want to do that to anybody in Classic on stream. And then on the clan side, we have a binary of Smoke Jaguars, generic Astral Camo. We have a trinary of Clan Wolf. We have a binary of Jade Falcons. We have a star of Clan Wolverine. We have a couple of stars of something. I don't know. I can't remember what they are. And then we have another star of Kappa Galaxy Smoke Jaguars. You should use the Timberwolf. I'm thinking. I don't know. I gotta think about that for tomorrow. That'll be fun. Hopefully, Tommy can come out and hang with us. For those of you that are in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, we will be having the 9th anniversary party for the roundtable on Saturday. So, myself and Tommy and Devin will be there. I got my friend Tyrone coming in from out of town. He's going to be here. We'll be up there having fun. I don't know exactly what the festivities are going to be other than, probably feeding Tommy copious amounts of alcohol and hoping he does something embarrassing that I can get on camera. And then share with people like Bezkar so he can torment him for the rest of his natural life. That would be very, very entertaining. So yeah, if you are in town, come out and hang out with us. We're going to have a lot of fun there. Sunday, we will be doing the normal talk show part. Now, I got these, I don't even know what I want to call these. Like they're pedestals. I'm going to put them somewhere, I think. Actually, you know what? I have gates to the arena. And we are going to make Jesse walk in through the gates of the arena. That is a good idea. I'll put that on the other side of the board there. Jesse can come in over here. There's one that's on screen. Good, I'll move it up a little closer. And two. Now, I'm doing this without going to the other side of the table because I'd have to unplug my mic to do that. So, forgive me if it's off-centered a little bit. I'll clean it up after we go off the air and make it nice and straight. But yeah, there, Jesse can walk in through there. I do have another rock somewhere, don't I? I think I do. I got a hill. We'll put a hill over there. Like so. And of course, to hide up the imperfections. Trees, trees, trees. Always more trees. I had nothing before after you said trinary. I am not a clan fan myself. I am Inner Sphere through and through. I like the clans as bad guys. I think they are a great narrative piece. I just wish they would go away in the lore. If you're listening, Ray, bring back Comstar. Bring back our friends. Bring them back. We miss them. No more Clan Seawolf or whatever these guys are called. We want the Inner Sphere in control of things. It would be funny, though, if the Capellans are the ones that kill Alaric Ward. That would be funny. I would be down for that 100%. The Capellans need their little bit of a heyday. They've been laughed at most of their existence. So I think that would be a good thing for the faction and their fans, of course. All 5 of them. Well, we have Tara, so deal with it. Well, you're a clan wolfer too, eh? Yeah, it's I am still so being straight faced and honest. I took a break from the game for a few years when when life hit. I got back into it when I injured my back and knee and couldn't play soccer and football anymore when I was like 42. So I've been back into gaming hardcore, keeping myself busy for the last 8 years. I turned 50 this year. And I missed the Dark Age, um, and the Republic Age and the Jihad era. So because I missed those eras, they're new to me still. So I am still in that mindset there. I have not worked my way over to the Ill Clan era yet. Um, Slowly but surely, I think I'll be more into it as soon as there are enough miniatures of the new designs for me to field so I can have my theater of the mind be on the table and have my immersion. Um, that's when I'll get into it big time. And those, everybody's seen those sneak previews of the sheets from Kerensky Con last year. And we know that they're coming. So I'm excited to see what those look like because I think Scroggins and Steiner and all the guys there on the design team have done a really good job with reimagining all my favorite mechs. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with for some of these new designs. One of them I am actually looking forward to. You did say the Timberwolf. I'm looking forward to the Savage Wolf miniature. Not because I'm a Timberwolf fan. I just think it looks cool and it's a new mech, and I'm like, yeah, I want that. I did recently build the Eris that Tommy brought back from Gen Con, I believe it was. So I've got that built. I'm going to do that up in Red's favorite, the Free Worlds League, because in the new eras they are champions. Don't tell Red I told him I said that. He might get a little upset. It's kind of a weird looking wall. We're just going to put this out here like this. And I will hide that like that. Just trying to create some depth and cover here. So on that side of the board, Jesse's got that wall. I kind of got this little piece here. It's again back to the playability and the evening things out on the table. Look at these two small pieces. I can go like this, like they're old, damaged entrances. Like that. I can hide the peg there. And we'll put some overgrowth. Go to this one here. I'll put some overgrowth there. And we'll hide it there. I'm actually going to move this in a little closer to here. What do you think the board's looking like right now, guys? Looking good? I think we got nice firing lane down here along the front side of the building. If we go back to the overhead here. So we got a kill lane here. Another one here. The outside parts I'm not really concerned about because the fight's gonna, as classic, it's probably gonna be contained into this area. So we've got a fair amount of cover here. We got obviously from the original part of the stadium that didn't fall down. We got lots of line of sight blocking on that side. We got hills to stand up on here. So, the guy can stand up here and fire down inside. I think we're pretty close to finished here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use those rocks again. So the edges here of the building, I'm going to build some rubble just to add to that idea that this place is old and destroyed. I'll come up with something on the way home as to what the simulator is trying to recreate. And I need some of the smaller rocks. Where did they go? Right here. So for anybody that's got any other questions in regards to actually making terrain and building it, if you guys are interested, let me know in the comments below. after the stream, or if you watch it at a later date. If you want to see us do more stuff like this at Six Sides, where it's not just straight gaming, where we're talking about painting, because I can bring Les in. We can give some tutorials. We can show you guys actually how to make stuff here in the studio. It doesn't take that long to pull everything down. As you see, put it up fairly quickly. We can take it down just a quick and create a hobby desk in here and show people, how to carve some of those hills that I was discussing earlier. Again, remember to like and subscribe. It is vital, especially for us with the Battletech stuff. We get drowned out a little bit here by the algorithm because of our success with Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun. So, we're always trying to get more Battletech fans in here. And I will say this, the people that do follow us for Battletech are very, very loyal. Our like to view ratio is extremely high. I just need more people doing it, which would be fantastic. So if you got friends that want to watch some cool content, interact with the Aces developers, see some cool game boards and miniatures, we're also open to ideas. You guys want to, fans want to come in, we can do it once in a while. We'll have you call in. You can play remotely like we do with some of our guests. We have no issue doing that. Can also have you guys help create scenarios, concepts, and ideas. The more you interact with us, obviously, the more we're going to listen. So, you want to see something cool built and designed on stream that you would think would be something neat or something at a convention. Drop it in the comments. We will gladly get to it and bring those ideas to life, and hopefully inspire you guys to do the same thing. To get out there and build and create things, especially if we can help you get there by showing you how to do the basics, right? So again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We got a cool board. Again, I'll go for a real quick perusal here. This will be our arena for tomorrow. I'll go back to the other side here. I might fill in a little bit here after I stop the stream, but I don't think so. I need that space, I think, there. And we'll go back to the overhead. There we go. So that'll be our arena for tomorrow. Please join us when we do the fight. Our Aces stream tomorrow will be an hour later than usual. I have recently changed my hours at work, so I won't be getting to the studio as early as I normally do. So going forward with the Friday Night Aces, we're going to be starting our streams at 7 o'clock instead of 6. And that way, we're trying to keep them in the 2-hour range right now for live streams. So from 7 to 9, that way you got enough time to post dinner, have a couple of beers for the single guys out there. And girls, you can go out and have your Friday night beers after you've watched us play some Battletech for a few hours. Again, like and subscribe. We thank you for your support, and we will see you tomorrow night. Have a good, happy Halloween, everybody. Stay safe and enjoy the